We'll come to the play, All My Sons. It's page 378.
Opened, ma'am.
Yes, thank you. There are many things, so please read all this on your own. I want you to come to page 382 because these are all necessary for you to make a note of and write in your exam. 382.
Ma'am, page number say again, ma'am.
382 అని చెప్తున్నాను కదమ్మా.
Okay.
కొంచెం మీరు ఇయర్ ఫోన్స్ పెట్టుకొని అలర్ట్గా ఉండండి. మీరు డోంట్ disturb because we have so much to do, please, today. Okay, Henrik Ibsen, another Irish playwright, had a lot of influence on Arthur Miller, who wrote this play, All My Sons. Come down to 522, realistic style. So realism is something very, very related to language. Sorry, drama. Of course, novels also. What do we mean by realism? Realism is basically presenting the picture as it really applies, as it is really seen. Realistic situations. Life as you see, the reality as you see. Okay, now come to page 383. What is the story? What is the action? The action of the play is set in August 1946 in the Midwest of USA. The events depicted occur between one Sunday morning and the following morning. Okay, so what is taking place in the play is on one Sunday morning and the following morning. But there's a lot of background to the story. That the background we have to understand. What is the background? 3.5 years before the play is taking place now, Larry Keller, a young boy, the son of Joe Keller, was reported missing in action while flying a mission off the coast of China. I'm going slow. I want you to understand, please. If you have your pen and paper, write down, because once you understand the story, it's easy for you to understand all the other things. So Larry Keller, the young pilot probably, was missing in action. Nobody knows whether the plane crashed or whether some enemies attacked him or whether what happened, nobody knows. Okay, this was 3 years ago. His father, Joe Keller, now this is where we have to pay attention once again very closely. Joe Keller is the father of a business. He's the head of a business. It means he is a businessman who is involved or who created or manufactured, sorry, yeah, I got the right word, who manufactured aero engine parts, some parts of engine, aeroplane. While he is manufacturing these crucial aeroplane cylinder heads, okay, I'm reading, when one night the production line began to turn out cracked cylinder heads Okay, so cylinder heads is what Joe Keller is manufacturing, and these cylinder heads are used in aeroplanes, especially what kind of aeroplanes? Air Force aeroplanes. Okay. It's not very clear whether it's Air Force aeroplanes, but definitely, okay. When these cylinder heads are not coming out properly, instead they are coming out with cracks, the night foreman, that is the supervisor, foreman means supervisor, he alerted Joe, the owner, through his deputy manager called Steve Deaver. Okay, so remember, this is the third name. Larry Keller is the son of Joe Keller. Joe Keller is the head of is a businessman who is producing cylinder heads, and Steve Deaver is the deputy manager. So when the cylinder heads are not coming out properly, Steve Deller is told about this by the supervisor. So now Steve, tell you what is Steve's next job now? See, somebody has to inform someone and ensure that things are in place. Or see, you can't send out something with a manufacturing defect to an aeroplane. Okay, because the whole thing will collapse. So when Steve telephoned Joe at home and asked him what to do, Joe Keller is worried because now all that has been spent in producing these cylinder heads, finally the cylinder heads are not coming out properly. So he's afraid of the loss, and he doesn't see the consequences of what would happen if these cylinder heads are used in the aeroplanes. So what he tells Steve, Joe told Steve to do welding over these cracks, repair them. And Joe told Steve, I will take responsibility for this. But I cannot come to work because I have influenza or flu. So Steve followed his boss' instruction, did welding over the cracks. The cylinders are out of the production unit. Nobody knows about this except the foreman, Steve, and Joe Keller. So the cylinders go, they are sent, distributed, sent to the aeroplane manufacturer. The manufacturers completed it. They sold the aeroplanes. We don't know who all bought it. But several weeks later, 21 aeroplanes crashed on that same day, killing all the pilots. So they began to now find out. Investigation revealed the fault in the cylinder heads. Now Steve and Joe were arrested and convicted. Because of them, 21 pilots lost their lives. How could they do it? So when they are arrested and investigation is taking place, Steve told that this is what has happened, but Joe denies, saying no, whatever Steve is saying is not right. So he put the whole blame on Steve, saying Steve did not tell me. He knew nothing of what had happened. And so Steve was imprisoned, whereas Joe was released. But Larry Keller, the son of Joe Keller, Before his last flight, he is also a pilot. He was in love with his girl, Anne, who is the daughter of Steve. So Anne and Larry are in love with each other. Before his last flight, Larry read about his own father and Steve's arrest. So his father and his father-in-law now both are arrested. He is ashamed of how his father and his father-in-law could allow such a thing to happen. So he was planning to commit suicide. Anne did not tell anybody about this letter. And nobody heard about Larry again. He is reported missing in action. But Larry's mother, that is Joe Keller's wife, is waiting and waiting. She believes that Larry will come someday. Her name is Kate. Kate is the mother of Larry, or the wife of Joe. So Kate knows her husband is guilty, but she loves her son and she cannot accept. So she says that Larry is alive somewhere. I don't think he's dead and he's going to come back sometime. So how does she go about? She keeps Larry's room spick and span, exactly as it is. And she is madly supporting Joe's crime. And she tells Joe, just like I, as a wife, am supporting you, you have to support me in my belief that Larry will come back and marry Anne. Okay. On the other hand, Steve's children, Anne and George, her brother, they both disown their father, believing him guilty. But George has gone at last to visit his father in jail. And Steve told him of the truth. Kate, the mother, plants a tree as a memorial to Larry. So this Saturday night, when Anne is in love now with Larry's brother, Chris. So Chris calls Anne home. That Saturday night, there is a storm. The tree planted as a memorial to Larry is broken by the wind. Kate wakes up from a dream of Larry and enters the garden to find the tree broken. Then the next morning, the play shows that Anne has come to visit the Kellers. For 2 years, Larry's brother Chris has been in correspondence with her, and now he wants to propose to her. And she has realized that Chris is in love with herself. Okay, this is the background to the action and most of the story. Now come to page 387 very quickly. Act 1. This is a 3-act play. So what do you find in the first act? First act, the Keller's family is introduced. How Joe Keller is a self-made businessman and is visited by his neighbor Frank. Kate asks Frank to make a horoscope for Larry to determine whether the day he disappeared 3 years earlier was an astrologically favorable day or not. This is so much like India. right? We try to find out, was that a good day? Is this a good day to start something? Because Kate still believes Larry is coming back. Reinforced by the fact that Larry's memorial tree blew down in a storm that morning. So she thinks that it was a good day that went out, or whatever, whether it's a good day or bad day, he is still going to come back because the memorial tree is blown down. So mother demands that Joe in particular should believe that Larry is alive, because she thinks that if the son is dead, that means their son's blood is on his hands, because father is a businessman who has made the aeroplane heads, and Larry is also a pilot, right? So Chris believes otherwise. And that means he believes that Larry is not going to come back. And Chris wants his mother to give up her false hope. Why? Because now he is in love with Anne, Larry's former fiancée. And he wants his mother to accept Larry's death and move on in life so that he can marry Anne. After Anne enters, it is revealed that Anne's father, Steve, is in prison for selling cracked cylinder heads to the Air Force, causing 21 planes to crash. Joe was his boss. We know the story all along, right? I'm reading the last line. Chris also reveals that while leading a company, he lost all his men and is experiencing survivor's guilt. Meanwhile, Joe receives a call from George. George, that is the brother of Anne, son of Steve. And George says, no, wait, I'm coming to settle something. While Chris avoids telling his mother about the engagement, their next door neighbor, Sue Babliss, emerges and reveals that everyone on the block still thinks Joe is guilty. Now, who is actually guilty? That's $1 million question. Is it Joe or is it Steve? Whose mistake is it? So the neighbor comes and tells, no, everyone on the block, everyone thinks that Joe is guilty. George comes. Okay. George arrives to stop the wedding. He says, no, and you don't know what kind of a family you're getting into. So he tells his sister, I went to visit dad. And he tells Anne that his father is innocent. And he accuses Keller and insists that Anne will not marry Chris, because Chris is the son of Joe who destroyed his own family. Because what did Joe want? Okay, I'll come to the discussion later. Joe charms George by being friendly and confident. Even now, Joe Keller does not want to accept saying, yes, I'm sorry, I made this mistake. No. He's still trying to make sure that Chris marries Anne. Okay? Joe still tries to butter up George, tries to be very nice to George. But Kate reveals that Joe has suddenly, in the course of conversation, okay? See, look at the arguments. Steve Deaver says, that night when I called him, he said, I have flu, I'm sick, I cannot come. But Kate, the mother, reveals that Joe has not been sick in 15 years. So Kate, when she says, no, my husband was never sick, right? Then Joe has come up with one more lie to cover up that particular night when he should have gone and changed everything or withdrawn. George attacks them once more. Frank comes in with the horoscope and implies that Larry is still alive, which is just what Kate wants to hear. We all sometimes want to hear what we want to hear. We don't want to hear the truth, so we will act as if we don't want to hear. Okay, Chris, however, is furious with his father despite Joe's explanation that he's merely building a business for his sons, which Chris never accepted. Now, when Chris' confidence in his father's innocence is now shaken, because there are so many holes now. All along, actually, Steve Deaver's children are so very well matured. The moment they got to know that their father was involved, they disowned their father. Whereas Joe Keller's children are also very good. Only Joe Keller did not tell them the truth. So the moment Steve told George the truth, George was ready to accept his father. And that is why he's fighting for his father. Now, Chris also, when he comes to know about his father's actual crime, he's shaken. And he confronts his parents. Mother thinks that Larry is alive. See, mother's condition is God would punish my son, my children, or me, or somewhere. If Larry is dead, that means Joe has killed him by shipping out those defective parts. So she doesn't want to accept the truth. So Chris shouts angrily at his father for being inhuman and as a murderer, and he is a murderer, right? Now he wonders what he must do in response to this unpleasant new information. The new information that actually Steve did tell him, and all that Joe was interested was in making money and building a business for his sons. So Joe's interest was only making money. Joe, whose interest was only money, is now stunned at how they're turning on him. Because Larry said, I'm going to kill myself because my father has killed 21 pilots. So Anne emerges soon after and is forced to show mother the letter that Larry wrote to her before he died, which is actually a suicide note. I'm reading the last line. Larry killed himself in response to the family's responsibility and shame due to the defective parts. So now Joe Keller realizes that his actions are turning on him again. He lost his son, Larry, and now Chris is also angry with him. So with this final blow, Joe finally understands in the eyes of Larry and in a symbolic moral sense, all the dead pilots are actually his sons. So he says he's going into the house to get a jacket, and then he will drive to the jail and turn himself in. He says, no, I am going to surrender myself. But a moment later, gunshots are heard and Joe killed himself. And Kate tells Chris not to blame himself, because now Chris again would go in another guilt trip. Because Chris confronted him, Joe committed suicide. But Kate now tells him that you are not to be blamed. So what is the play about? All My Sons. Let's talk about the title. Remember, I always tell you titles are important. So all my sons means
21 pilots.
what?
All those 21 pilots. All the
Yes,
21
yes, yes.
pilots who have died are his sons, no?
Yes, yes. Thank you. Thank you. Right. So the title is important. So Larry killed himself, and the other 21 pilots who died are all his sons. Now, this play, I think American Dream, Dr. Christopher has mentioned and discussed at length and in detail. So, American Dream is interpreted differently by different people. So, for the Blacks, it is freedom and equality and the right to live wherever they want, the right to get a job of their choice. Even if they're rich, they can't live in some rich locality because they are exclusive neighborhoods for white people. For a woman, sometimes it's like owning a house is a dream fulfilled. For a Black man, sometimes it's just like finding a job to live to provide 3 meals for their family, because Blacks are uneducated and Blacks don't get jobs quickly. And even if they do get a job, sometimes if there is some crisis, it is a Black man who will be taken out of the job first. They are the first ones to be ousted and removed from the job. So, American Dream is defined differently to different people. On the whole, American Dream symbolizes people becoming rich, having money. It's standing for a capitalistic society. So, All My Sons is a critique of American Dream. Joe Keller, he wanted to build just business and become rich, not only for himself, but for his family. But what happened? In the end, when you pursue a dream, a single minded pursuit of the dream at the cost of everything else, a dream without values, a dream without morals, a dream without, see, money is important, but how you make money is also more important, not also, but it's the most important thing. Because if you make money in the wrong way, that money is not going to satisfy you in any manner. It's not going to help you fulfill and realize your dreams. Right? So it's not just money which is important. So Arthur Miller, who has written some important plays, is focusing on the illusion of American dream, the faults of American society. Okay? You can read for yourself page number 388, 389. I want you to underline 2.5, innovative presentation. Please underline the third line from the bottom. We are familiar with this concept. It's something like our Indian concept of karma. This ideology is present in almost all cultures, all civilizations, all religions. Okay? So underline this. The principal concept of the play, the past has an enduring influence on the present, which never quite goes away. Miller's works leave the readers with the message that one cannot ignore the past. So if you have laid the wrong foundation, you can't expect to have the right building. Right? Okay, come to page number 390. You have characters. Joe Keller is an interesting person. Why should now Joe Keller die? Underline the last line, last 2-3 lines of 311. When the truth comes out, Joe justifies his actions by claiming he did it for his family. But at the end of the play, underline, he is forced to accept responsibility. His suicide is necessary to restore the moral order of the universe and allow his beloved son, Chris, to live free from guilt. Otherwise, Larry died with guilt, committed suicide. And now, if Joe Keller doesn't take action upon himself for the wrongs he has done, Chris would not have been able to face the world. Chris is already not able to face his fiancée. So Chris cannot live in the world with honesty. So underline moral order that has to be restored. Then 312, Joe calls Steve a little man. He's a little man because he did whatever Joe told him. He should have been strong enough and bold enough and tell Joe that, no, Joe, what we are doing is wrong. We cannot send out like this. This is an aeroplane, not anything else. Number 313. Joe is outraged when Kate and Chris attack him for saving his business. For Joe, economic security is the biggest concern. He tells Chris, I spoiled both of you. I should have put him out when I was 10, like I was put out, and make him earn his keep. Underline the last 2 lines of that paragraph. Until he finally understands the cause of Larry's death, his primary value is the success of his business and his ability to make money. Only when he really understands that he's the one who caused Larry's death, then he realizes that he's the one who's gone wrong. Miller does not totally demonize Joe. Miller is like a typical 1940s father figure who just wants everything provided for their children. Underline the last 2 lines of that passage on 391, that is the first paragraph. I did it for you. It was a chance and I took it for you. Joe is basically not evil. He has a tragic lack of vision. He couldn't foresee how What a costly, terrible mistake that would be in future. Right? You have then Chris Keller, Kate Keller, all this you can read on your own. You have Anne Deaver, Jim Bablis, Sue and George Deaver. I want to come to you to come to page 394, please. Symbols, Larry Stream. That's an important symbol. Then you have jail. In Act 1, neighborhood kid Bert asks Joe to arrest another boy for saying a bad word. Joe has given out that he has a jail in his basement. So the jail in the basement, it's all fun and games. But that's actually not fun. What happened to be a jail in the basement actually becomes his own jail. He goes to the jail, comes back, but then he's lost in his own jail of being money-minded and losing out the actual family. Ultimately, he had to kill himself. The major themes, American Dream. I have to discuss this to some extent. The concept of wealth, defense, how important is wealth? You have a doctor character in the play. So the doctor's wife, come to page 395. Please read all this and underline. Dr. Bablis' wife, okay? She tells him, underline, the doctor's wife nags him to make more house calls to increase their income. The doctor's wife wants more and more work and more house calls for doctor to become more and more rich. So Joe Keller defends his war profiteering, saying, I did this for the family, for the business. And I'm so glad Chris tells his fiancée, Annie, I'm going to make a fortune for you, but not in the same manner. Questions of morality and ethics are important. I already mentioned how you make money is very, very important, not how much money you make. Then family is a very strong concept. How do the family members relate to each other? How does the family function? After the World Wars, American literature talked a lot about families. A lot of dramas were written on this. Because families began to disintegrate. Families began to be destroyed and broken. Marriage seems to be doomed by the compromised life of these young people or their families. Courage is a theme. Relatedness is a theme. And the past is something you can't escape. Okay. Please come to page 384. You have a brief in a nutshell. So this also gives you an idea. If you think you can manage it, I didn't want to elaborate on what is easy because Moby Dick is a long novel. If you come to your notes, You have page 224, starting for Moby Dick, up to page 274. So it's roughly 50 pages. Moby Dick is a significant thing. So I think we'll try to spend a little more time on Moby Dick after All My Sons. What do you say? Shall I give you, what's the time? It's 2:41. Shall I give you 5 minutes break or 10 minutes break?
Ma'am, up to 5:30 you only will take.
Yes, ma, but I'm supposed to take. I can take. But you will be sleeping.
Nothing will happen, ma'am.
Yeah. So shall I spend a little more time discussing?
We want break 5 minutes.
Yes. So we'll take. No, we'll take 10 minutes break because I am the one who's
Yes,
constantly speaking. So it's 2:40.
All characters are mixing, ma'am.
Yes. So that's why I want to give you a break. So we'll start at 3 o'clock.
మ్యామ్ ఇదే ముందు నుంచి స్టార్ట్ చేస్తే మాకు ఎంత బాగుండేది మేడం.
ముందు నుంచి అంటే
విత్ ఇన్ షార్ట్స్ అండ్ ఆల్ ఆర్ టేకింగ్ 9 to 5:30 క్యారెక్టర్స్ అన్ని మిస్ అయిపోతున్నాయి మేడం.
Yes, I know.
And in each and every paper there are stories, poems, dramas, ma'am.
True. That's why I'm going slow. I'm not giving you too much.
Yes, ma'am.
So maybe what we'll do is after 10 minutes, it's 2:43. 3:05 we will start.
Yes, ma'am.